we are live.
Nice.
What's going on, dude?
This is episode 6. Is that correct?
7.
7. Okay.
On episode 7.
What's good, my brother?
East
How are
Coast
you?
Podcast. Good, man.
East Coast
Can't
Podcast,
complain.
episode 6. G Diesel and Mike Myers.
Yes, we are back in the flesh.
What's up, man? Yes, indeed.
Um,
I heard a Master Ace album from 2024 the other day. That's actually pretty dope.
Yeah? Which one?
Yeah.
Do you remember the name of it?
It was like a brand new Master Ace and DJ Marco Polo album. You know, and like
Okay.
he was great in the 90s. But he's like consistently on the low made like good hip hop. And he my buddy sent it to me and I was like, wow, this is dope. It's crazy.
Okay. Richmond Hill, I think it's called.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Richmond Hill. Yep.
All right. Adding it to the library now.
Yeah,
I didn't even know that came out. That's how on the low that guy is.
And you know what's funny about it too, right? Is like that it's hard to find albums that you like listen. I think we've had this conversation before, right? That modern albums that you listen to start to finish or anything like that. So like if somebody comes out with an album which is just like a collection of these individual singles, not always like a narrative thread between it all. But if there's like 4 songs on there that in like to my modern standards, that makes it like a classic. If it's got like 4 good songs, you know what I mean? So I think that one has like at least 4 good songs. So I was like, it's pretty dope.
I don't remember the last time I listened to an album front to back. That was like, because like you said, they're not cohesive anymore. It's just singles.
No, rarely. And you end up skipping through stuff and whatever, and it just doesn't have the same, I don't know, like I said, that narrative thread that ties it all together, that weaves through it all. You know, it's not, they're not built that way. They're not intended to be listened to like that, I guess, as much anymore. You know, it's like a little collection.
They're trying to get streaming numbers instead of album sales. So
exactly.
I think Kendrick's probably the only one doing it. Like his are cohesive albums for the most part.
Yep. And here's the thing, like, and this might be an unpopular opinion, but like I think Kendrick is ultra talented. But I even like Good Kid, Mad City, like I know how good it is and I enjoyed it, but it's not something that I come back to. You know what I mean? Like as good as he is, as talented as he is, as important as his music is, like, and all that's undeniable. It's still like, I don't know. Something about it is missing for me, and I can't quite explain what it is. And I feel like
it's West Coast.
Like, yeah, maybe that's it. But you know what's funny though is that like I like Schoolboy Q and Ab-Soul and all those guys in his group. Like so. I don't know if it's that. I don't know what it is. Like I might like Schoolboy Q more than Kendrick Lamar. As crazy as that sounds, you know.
Schoolboy's awesome. I like he's right up there with Kendrick.
Yeah.
But Kendrick's, I think it's called Section 80, his first album. Right. That was a good one. You might dig that one more.
Yeah, you know, I don't know if I listened to that. I remember there was a song, I think maybe the first thing I encountered with him was, is it called Cartoons and Cereal? With him and Gunplay. Did you ever hear of that?
I don't know if that's on that album. I got to go back.
I don't know if it's on that album, but I want to say it's in the era before Good Kid, Mad City, when he was like sort of building his rep, and it's dope.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that song's crazy, and like he's super talented. And it's obvious in that song, and the song's kind of got like this dark, weird, like production and stuff. It's a super cool song, but I was all right. That was like the first time I encountered him. But yeah, no, I don't know if I ever listened to it. I've heard of Section 80, but I don't know if I ever listened to it. So maybe I need to listen to it, and then I'll be like, oh, that's my favorite Kendrick Lamar album. Totally possible. Totally possible.
Yeah, because Good Kid, Mad City, and Section 80 are my 2 favorite from him. And then the others are like, I think one of them is called Damn. Is that the album?
Yeah,
I think. That was good. That had some bangers, but the 2 others I have to be in the mood for to listen to.
Yeah, and like I said, like it's never me not thinking this isn't good, and it's never me thinking that he's not talented. Never those thoughts. Just the thoughts like, I'm not feeling this necessarily, right? Like, and the other thing too is that it's not necessarily about him, because I could put together like a 10-song mixtape or playlist, however you want to say it, right, of Kendrick songs that are fire. But so many of them are him with somebody or him as a feature. And
Okay.
they're less like those album songs. Like he's got an incredible song with Pusha T. He's got the "Don't Kill My Vibe" remix with Jay-Z's unbelievable. Like there's all these songs that he has. There's a song with Big Sean and Jay Electronica that's incredible. Like so he's got all these songs out there with different artists that are amazing that I love. But in terms of like a single cohesive album that he made that I come back to, there isn't one. But maybe Section 80 will be it. That'll be my required listen.
That's your homework. Oh yeah, we got to do our cheers.
Cool. I need that. Cheers, my brother. Cheers. Yeah, I need that. I need a little homework. I'll take it.
Yeah, let's hop into some articles.
Okay.
Talk some shit.
Yep, let's do it.
There we go.
I'm excited.
Here's the first one. Can you see that on your screen?
Yep.
All right. Supplement company fires back at Ryan Garcia's claim product contained banned substance.
Yep.
So he apparently tested positive for Taurine. We've talked about this before. They're now putting the blame on a NutraBio product. I think it's called Supercarb.
Right.
I know you're familiar with NutraBio, but anybody else out there, I mean, they are one of the most transparent companies in the game. I mean, that's their entire marketing play is they disclose on their label the grams of every single thing that's in that bottle down to the flavorings and colorings. So to me, I mean, this seems like the wrong company to place the blame on, just because, I mean, they're going to come back and sue him probably because they have a lot to lose from this article coming out and the blame being placed on him. What are your thoughts on that?
All right, so NutraBio, it's interesting, right? Because NutraBio, I feel like has become a big player in the industry most recently, almost like kind of like during the lifespan of G-Code, right? Yep. Where they were around doing private label stuff and making products and maybe international stuff for like a long time. Like they're not a new company, but in terms of like them being big in the brick and mortar and like just like general consumer supplement space in America, it's only like the past like 6 to 8 years or something like that, I'd say, right? And yeah, I'm not ultra familiar with their products on like a personal use standpoint, but that's always been their reputation, that they go above and beyond to be as transparent as possible. And obviously, with how we approach what we do, like I very much admire that and respect that. So, that right off the bat is something that I certainly tip my cap to, and as always, at least from a perspective of quality and trustworthiness, always put them on a higher level for me. Like I always thought, oh, that's a brand you can trust, and you can assume that when you buy that product, whether you like the product or not, specifically whether it's the formula or the flavor, whatever, regardless of those factors, the actual claims made on the label, what the supplement facts panel says, you can trust is actually in the bottle. So I've always felt that way about them, which is saying a lot, right? Like that alone is a high threshold in terms of how you feel about a company, right? So when I heard that he was claiming it was them, it seemed like he was coming up with an alibi without being well informed in doing so. Like he was trying to come up with, my read was that he was coming up with sort of a bullshit story to cover his own ass, and then doesn't know the supplement industry well enough to realize that that's probably the wrong company to pin something like that on. Beyond that, and I just looking at it practically too, not even knowing NutraBio's reputation, right? If I excluded that, right? But just the fact, and I think we've had this conversation before, that Taurine and SARMs and peptides and those kind of products are like sort of these like specialty gray market ingredients that you're not going to find in every like general supplement manufacturing warehouse. You're just not, right? So the thought that there's SARMs floating around in the same warehouse where they're making like sort of like these bulk commodity products, which is what he pointed at as being the product that he found the Taurine in, right? It was in a carb product, right?
Yeah.
Just carbs. So it's not like he
Right.
found that ingredient. You know what I mean? Like he was taking some weird test booster, and he's like, "Oh, it's in this," and then I'd be like, and not necessarily with NutraBio, but if he was taking some weird test booster from some company I hadn't heard of, or some company that had a reputation for doing like shady stuff, right, or whatever, or
Yeah.
like towing that line, I might be like, "Oh, okay, I could see a product, an ingredient like that, finding its way into that test booster product, right?" Or like a kitchen sink pre-workout or something like that. It finds its way in there. But not in a million years would I think, oh, that's gonna find its way into like a carb powder, like a
Right.
carb, like a it would be like him saying he found it was in his whey protein. I'd be like, there's 0% chance that that's
Yeah.
gonna be in a protein powder. So that was my
Yeah. And
that
it
was my
was
read on it. It was an alibi that he came up with without really researching it or thinking it through or knowing enough about the supplement industry to realize the sort of logical leaps that have to be made for that connection to happen.
right. And I mean, like it was the amount found was like in the picograms, I think, which is like
Right,
what, a millionth of a gram or something.
right.
Which is strange for two reasons. One, I don't know how easy it is to spike your product with a picogram of an ingredient, right?
Right,
I don't even know how you go about doing that.
right.
Um, and two, I guess playing devil's advocate,
Yeah,
is there a manufacturer in China or India or wherever they're getting the raws from who aren't being
right.
completely transparent with what else is running on their lines?
Sure.
And I think, the problem is like, does a picogram of ostarine do anything to anybody, right? Or
Probably
if
not.
we were to test every single type of food we eat down to the picogram, you're going to find stuff that's not supposed to be in there. I mean,
Right. You're gonna
which
find
is
weird stuff. There'll be street drugs in there and all kinds of weird stuff
right.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And is it enough to affect the human body at that point? Um, and then too, like the amount found in his urine sample was also very, very minuscule,
Right.
which is strange. Like I mean, I don't know how ostarine works and what the half-life is on
Yeah.
it, but did he ingest enough to affect
Get
his
anything out.
performance even?
Right.
Right.
Right. Right.
And I
Right. Was there any point in even taking it if there was that little present in his sample? Like
right.
you wonder. You wonder.
And
Right. Unless he had been taking it for a long time, or he had been taking it for a while and then hadn't been taking it for
mhm,
an extended period leading up to the drug test. I don't know.
right. Yeah, that
I
could be
don't
it
know.
too.
But
Um,
yeah, the initial impression I got was that just doesn't seem like the kind of company. And the other product, it looked like
yeah.
almost like the other brand. It looked like almost like an Herbalife. Am I crazy?
Yeah,
Like that kind of
very,
product
very like
line.
clean label that you'd find on the shelf of a grocery store. It was
Right,
an
right,
amino acid supplement.
right. Which is another
But I
product that you wouldn't think you would find. Wouldn't be spiked with ostarine on purpose, at the very least. You
mhm,
know, like
yeah,
neither of those products are the kind of products that you think that someone would be sneaking in illicit supplements. I mean, illicit substances into.
yeah,
You know,
right,
like I said, maybe
yeah,
a kitchen sink pre-workout, maybe a test booster, something like that, where somebody wants to take it and be like, "Wow, I started taking this, and now I started taking this powerful product, and now I notice this difference." But I don't think that anyone would go into taking an amino product or taking a carb powder and be expecting that kind of physiological response. You know,
mhm,
so that wouldn't be the product if you were in the market to spike a product with something like that. That wouldn't be the kind of product you do it to.
right.
You know,
It doesn't make sense.
it doesn't.
I
It doesn't.
I wasn't in the industry at the time, but back in the day, like Gaspari was spiking products and other companies with actual anabolic steroids, and I had heard like they would do it and they would get caught, or word on the street was that they were doing it, and then the products would sell out. Everybody was trying to get them, right?
Right. I mean, it's funny, right? Yeah. I remember the other maybe Blackstone had like that kind of reputation with their products too, right?
Mhm.
And instances like that. And that's a funny thing, right? Where I remember even back to guys telling me about the original metrics, right? and that the original metrics, which is before my time, had a thing called base and plus. So you
Mm.
were supposed to take like a scoop from base and a scoop from plus. You mix it together, and this makes this magical brew, right? And every Jack dude in the world, it's probably like early '90s, was using this stuff and raving about it, right? And then they blew up a little bit. They went a little more mainstream. They started to come out with the packets, and it became like a more mainstream product. And every dude who ever used it said, "Man, it was you missed out on the first metrics, man. It was never the same, right?"
Uh-huh.
And then there are all these. If you probably went to Reddit or Googled it or something, right? There's probably rumors about what was in the original metrics, actually, right? Whether there was D-ball in it or what was in it that made people feel so that it was so effective and that they felt so good on it. And that kind of rumor can definitely help drive sales, right? Like
Mhm.
if somebody's out there being like, I don't know what's in this shit, man, but I take it and I feel crazy, or I got exponentially stronger, or I gained 20 pounds, there'll be a rush to the stores to try to get it, So it's like
Yeah.
it's gaining notoriety, right? But notoriety that can be positive and that can generate revenue, that
Right.
happens. That definitely happens in this industry, where something that would be perceived as a negative, right? Like, oh, this product is spiked. A lot of people are like, yeah, it's awesome. That's great. Like, I remember a guy talking about how, like one of the selling points about meats and dairy products in the country is that there's no added hormones, right? And I remember
Mhm.
some guy saying, no, no, I want the one with the extra hormones,
Right.
right? So it's kind of like that. It's that same approach. Like, no, man, I don't want the clean supplements. I want the supplements that are spiked with all the dirty shit. You
The
know,
real stuff, yeah.
that's it. That's it. That's what
There
people are
was a
looking for.
time back around the Jack 3D days, there was, BPI, Gaspari, Nutrex all had their fat burners would I don't so they claimed it was 1.3. I don't think it was 1.3. I think it was
Right.
more like it felt like Adderall. Like you could take this and work all
Wow.
day and be dialed
Right.
in and focused and
Sure, sure, sure.
um that was this like 2010s were just a crazy time for
Yes,
stimulants.
for sure,
And
for
now,
sure.
government banned them, rightfully so. And I haven't found a product that matches anything that was back from there in terms of like focus.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember I just along those same lines, I remember GAT making a test
Oh
booster,
yeah.
and we were various test boosters, and we were when I was working for Animal, like they'd be like a booth over from us. So you know how it goes in the trade shows. You become friendly with the people who are working in your vicinity, especially when you're like locked in a space for a whole weekend, right? And like where it'd be like, oh, we just to try different stuff and see what's out there. Like we trade some stuff, like, oh, here's some
Mhm.
proteins, vitamins, and stuff, and they'll give you some stuff. And this was like the thing that's crazy is like this is like an above the board company that was like in a lot of the big box retailers,
Yep.
and the test booster had a bunch of pro hormones in it, and they were like
Mhm.
just selling it, and it was like just
Right.
openly selling it, and they were like, oh shit, like you know crazy. And this is probably around that same time period you're talking about, right? Like to 2010s, late you know, '08, '09, 2010, around that era. And these companies were I wouldn't say openly selling it because it was I think like the heavy hitter powerful stuff was kind of like mixed into a proprietary blend, right?
Mhm.
Where you might
Yep.
if you didn't know to look for it, you wouldn't realize what was in the product. But it's an effective common marketing tactic over the years, like I wonder if there was a rush to buy the super carb when he came
Yeah.
out and
Right.
said it. I wonder, like, did they sell out? Like, was everybody, oh, I need that, it spiked with whatever, it's gonna be the best carb I ever used. I wonder if that drove sales. We didn't we talk about Ray Lewis and the deer velvet antler,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and bucked up, the whole bucked up empire was built on the strength of Ray
Mhm.
Lewis getting busted and claiming that he took the deer velvet antler spray. You know, crazy.
I remember walking a trade show back when Bucked Up first came out, looking at them being like, "This is so stupid." And then I was stupid for thinking that was stupid because they blew up.
Well, yeah, and it's like eh, you don't know, man, because right, like your perception being maybe like a little bit more seasoned and knowledgeable and experienced and shrewd, maybe discerning, right? You
Yeah.
having those things going for you and how you approach and how you look at the stuff, being more analytical and stuff like those might not be things that other consumers are bringing to the table in this
Mhm.
discourse and when it's
Right.
determining what it is they want to take, what they want to use and whatnot. So, you know, man, it's funny because when I saw the antlers, I thought, oh, like they're gonna appeal to like the hunting crowd.
Mhm.
That because that's what it
Which
looked like. It
I think
reminded, yeah,
I think part of it is.
yeah, yeah. It reminded
Uh,
me of that, you know, and I'm not saying that even in a negative way, right? But like, you know, the mossy oak camo kind of vibe. When I saw the
mhm.
antlers on there, it made me think of, you know, that aesthetic, like one degree more like sort of rural than like Carhartt, right? Like
Mhm.
and that audience. And I thought, oh, maybe that like that's what they're trying to sell to that consumer. But you know, for whatever reason, the stuff took off. And like I said,
Yeah.
that Ray Lewis getting busted didn't hurt. You know,
Nope. It's the whole reason for
didn't
the
hurt.
company.
Yeah, crazy.
Um, the other thing, and while we're reminiscing, I remember back in the day, the sample packs of like a pre-workout or a fat burner sometimes were different formulas than what you would actually buy. I remember
Interesting.
this with Nitroflex specifically. I think it was at an Arnold, and I got
Okay.
sample packs of that, and I took that before a workout, and I was just it felt like rocket fuel. And then I went out
Right.
and bought the pre-workout like a week later, and it didn't do that. And it
Interesting.
was the only thing I could think of is that their sample packs were different than what they were actually selling to get you hooked on the product.
Wow. I mean, it's a tactic that would make sense. I mean,
Mhm.
you know, typically, just like this probably seems obvious, but I'll say it anyway, right? Like typically the way samples work, right, is that a company is running X amount of units, you know, full product, 30 serving units of their blue raspberry pre-workout, right? And
Mhm.
when they're running it, then they run samples along with it. So in theory, right, the samples are exactly the same thing that went in
Right.
that blue raspberry pre-workout that's going, and they would do it all at once because there's a efficiency, advantages to be gained by running 10,000 more servings, but now you're just going to put that into samples and you ran that at the same time as you made your full product, right?
Right.
So usually that's where samples come from. Samples are usually made at the same time as the finished product is, and then they're just packaged separately. One's put into the individual, packets, single serving
Mhm.
packets. The other one goes into full product, which makes sense. So it would really be like a real there would be intent. It would be an
Right.
actual strategy to be like, all right, we're going to make a separate batch of this stuff and spike it with this extra ingredient, and then we're going to use those for samples, and we're going to get people hooked like that. You know, if that's the
Yeah. I
case,
could
and
have just gotten used to it.
I'm sure it's been the case over the years, but pretty dishonest. It's
Yeah.
pretty shady to do that.
That was during the Wild Wild West days, so anything's
Yeah,
possible.
yeah, for sure,
All right, let's hop
for sure.
into our next article.
Okay,
You sent me this one. Uh, What's going on? Pull it up.
now when I come across this stuff, I immediately shoot it your way. You
Does
and
that say
Skull.
the top
Skull's like
pick?
my boy Mark Bernardi. Skull. He's like the director of operations for G Code. He's like he's in the trenches with me in G Code every day. So whenever I come across like these kind of stories, I'll send them his way. But I
Uh-huh.
send them your way immediately because I'm like, oh, you're gonna love this stuff because I feel like you're always
I do.
looking at this. Not only is it content for what we do, but it's also like I feel like you're scouring the media for these kind of stories. So whenever I see one, I shoot it your way.
Yeah,
I
I
came across
appreciate
this
that.
today. Crazy.
Yeah. So colon cancer crisis in young people could be fueled by booming drink brands adored by teens. And what the article goes on to say is they haven't tested this, that taurine helps to proliferate cancer cells. And I guess the cancer feeds on the taurine and grows. But they don't know that that's the case. So one, like I read elsewhere that taurine actually helps stop the spread of cancer. Um,
There's
I
everything
hope
you
it's
need
not
to
the
know about
taurine.
how studies work.
Exactly.
I'm
You would
sorry about
hope
that. I
it's
didn't
not
mean to
the
cut you off. Right?
taurine.
Yeah.
You would hope it's not the taurine because our bodies make taurine and it's found in a lot of what we eat. And
Right.
this feels like just another one of those articles going after energy drinks.
It's absolutely that, right? And it's also one of those causation correlation situations, also, right?
Mhm,
Because the obvious thing to me, right, is that like cancer, I think, in my opinion, taurine is an amino acid, a pretty innocuous one, right? That has
mhm,
some, potential athletic benefits. Um, finds its way, for cell volumization, for some people claim like energy, whatever, right? Even like lactic acid buffering, maybe that kind of stuff, right? And um, so there's like some benefits to it. Like you're saying, it's found in food. It's is synthesized through the human body can synthesize taurine, but then also um, the thing that strikes me, right, when I come to when it comes down to like causation versus correlation, is just the thought that like saying that it proliferates cancer, like cancer is a tissue also, right? So in
mhm,
theory, anything that would grow tissue, healthy tissue, could
mhm.
potentially cause cancer to grow, right? So
Right.
think about
Yeah.
the things that affect, um, you know, muscular growth, right? So like calories, protein, essential amino
Mhm,
acids, right? All this stuff, right? That could potentially grow healthy tissue, could potentially grow cancerous tissue, like so taurine maybe having any sort of anabolic, and when I say anabolic, I just mean muscle building properties, would then lend itself to potentially having, like, theoretically, cancer building properties in a person who had cancerous cells. You know what I mean?
mhm.
So it's like that's one of the things that makes me think like if you could say all I'm saying is if you could say it about taurine, I feel like you could say it about 50 other things that we
Yeah.
eat on a regular basis, whether they be in supplements or just in our food, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, and that if you go through that article, there's a link on one of the paragraphs that links to a story that they also think that a high sugar diet with along with low fiber causes this sort of cancer. So they don't within the own article, they don't know what's doing it. And
Right,
it's like, why write this article? Why put
right.
this information out there? Right?
So that I would come across it and send it to you. That's why.
Yep. Exactly. And it's
That's
the
why,
Daily
right?
Mail of all places.
Yeah, exactly, right? And it's clickbait, like clickbait is the new headline. Like there is no headline that isn't clickbait. There is no media that isn't clickbait related at this point
Mhm,
because all anybody's trying to do is drive views, drive shares, which is exactly what I did, right? I came across to send to my buddy.
mhm.
Like that's
Yep.
what they want you to do.
Yeah.
Um and the reason I sent it to you, right, wasn't even about the claims. It was just because the specific claims. It was just that it was about more controversial things related to it. It was another controversial thing related to an energy drink. So I sent it your way. And energy drinks are so popular that that headline would impact a lot of people. I think not much different than if it was about coffee, something in coffee
Mhm.
causing cancer, or,
Yep.
things that are popular in culture, right? Something in tacos causes cancer, right? Like, right? If it was stuff like anything like that that a lot of people enjoy, care about, utilize on a regular basis and whatnot, if they can find something about it that's going to kill you, then a lot of people are going to click on it, you know?
Mhm.
I think
Yeah,
that was
it's
very much
fear
the case with that. Yeah.
fear
Oh, for sure.
tactics.
For sure.
But I mean, I'm thinking of the, that warning that you have to put on all your labels from California about
Yeah.
this product may cause cancer. I think do you have that
Yep.
on your bottles? You
You
have
know,
to
we
use that for
don't
every.
yeah, we don't currently, but I feel the more and more business you do in California, the more and more necessary that is. So
Okay.
like you never like sending an odd, you know, tri-chamber or jug of protein to a specific person in California isn't necessarily enough of a reason for us to change our labeling. But like if we
Mhm.
had a presence on in a chain of stores in California, it might be like a different kind of
Right.
uh, you know, necessity that we do that. But you know that the thing about that too, right, is that that's like one of those strange moments of government overreach, right? Because
Hmm.
like it is all over the place in a Starbucks in California. That
Yep.
warning is on all the cups. It's like posted on the wall. It's like very prominent and in your face at Starbucks. And the reason is because Starbucks makes coffee. Coffee comes from coffee beans. Coffee beans come from the earth. And anything that comes from the earth is
Uh-huh.
potentially tainted by heavy metals.
Right.
So because there's lead in the soil and there's all kinds of heavy metal minerals in the soil, and as such, coffee beans could theoretically be tainted by lead and those kind of heavy metals, and for that reason, they put that message on there. So, like potatoes, like
Hmm.
it's been a while since I've been to Cali, and I don't know what happens if you go to like somewhere that sells French fries, but is that all over the place? At In-N-Out Burger or Five Guys or whatever? Like, is that all over? Is that same message there because they sell French fries? Like, it's possible
Hmm.
that it is, and it applies to so many things that it applies to so many things that it almost means nothing. You know?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's all we're saying is we don't know what causes cancer, but we're gonna just protect ourselves and put a warning on every single thing humans ingest, pretty much.
That's it. That's it. And the
Yeah.
coffee beans come from the earth, so now you're gonna make the stretch to say, oh well, coffee causes cancer. Well, it's like, well then, pretty much any food that grows in the soil causes cancer.
Yeah.
If we're gonna take it there, and that's then you can't eat anything.
Yeah.
And the
They just
water's tainted too, so you can't drink that either.
right. So
You
is the
know,
air. The air is messed up, and we're
you
just all
can't
gonna end up
breathe.
with cancer. Uh,
Yep. Yep. And
it's
I
like
mean,
somebody just
it's a sad commentary on the state of our environment and how we've taken care of the planet and being stewards of the planet, right? And the
Mhm.
concept of like conservatism, just for example, it means you're supposed to conserve things, right? And it's like
Yeah, yep,
there might not be a lot of conservation going on, especially as you deregulate, right? But
right.
then, the flip side of it that we talk about too is like, the government overreach where things are taken away for no good reason, out of fear. So it's like
Yeah.
trying to strike that balance. Like I don't doubt that California law initially was well intended,
Mhm.
but it's so broad reaching that that it undermines itself, and like I said, it ends up meaning nothing. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it was from a lawsuit. Somebody sued a food brand, and I guess the food brand couldn't prove that it didn't cause cancer. So instead
right?
of facing the lawsuit, they're just like, all right, we'll just put a label on our stuff,
Yeah,
which is
it's
crazy.
crazy. No, it's crazy. It's crazy. I remember having shaker cups, and the shaker cups had to have that kind of sticker on the shaker cup, even though you're not eating the shaker cup, but you're drinking out of the shaker cup, and maybe because the shaker cup is
Right.
made of plastic or whatever. And I was like,
Uh-huh.
man, like I literally was like I didn't want to give it to anybody in that wrapper because of that sticker, because it was so
Mhm.
far fetched. And but to to the person who doesn't know better, to the uninitiated, they see that and they think, oh my god, I can't drink out
Right.
of this cup; it's gonna kill me. And it's like, oh man,
Yep.
that sucks. So, you know,
That was the first time I ever saw the label was on a sports nutrition product. And I freaked out a little bit, and then I looked it up and realized it's on everything. And but there's people out there who won't do that. They'll just post to social media like a picture of this product and say, "Oh, this causes cancer. Avoid it at all costs."
right. And as if, and I mean, obviously it doesn't make any sense because I immediately like you think about all the people who die from alcohol and smoking, and you can
Yeah,
still buy those all the time. So I was just about to say,
yeah,
as if you could just buy something that causes cancer that everybody knows causes cancer and you're just allowed to do it. I mean, you are technically just allowed to do it, but
yeah.
yeah, so I strike that from the record wherever I was going with that. But you know, just the thought though, however, that if there was any kind of proof, I think that a specific amino acid, for example, or a specific vitamin or mineral, for example, cause a proliferated cancer, if there was any kind of proof or anything like that, it wouldn't be long before that stuff was taken out of foods. I don't.
Yeah,
I believe. You know.
100%.
But then they say all kinds of stuff about like what's in our breakfast cereals and that kind of stuff, and that there's weird ingredients in there, and there's you know stuff that goes into like industrial cleaners that ends up in the food we eat and whatnot, and it's like the same byproducts, the same ingredients. So you never know.
Right. Yeah, I think the latest one is the prime drinks.
Right.
People were posting that somebody posted that it caused leukemia in a child, and doctors are on there saying like leukemia doesn't come from dietary choices.
Right.
There's no way this thing caused leukemia. But I
Right.
guess the uproar is it contains forever chemicals,
Sure.
but so does water, and
Right.
it's well below the threshold where those forever chemicals will cause a problem to humans.
Right.
But of
Right.
course, everyone's freaking out and posting, and
Right,
yeah,
of course. And I mean, you look at these water, but like you look at water that's bottled in plastic and stored for long periods of time, and what leaches from the bottle into the actual water and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, that stuff's troubling too. And you know, and they say the tap water is no good for you, right? So we're gonna pay for bottled water in hopes that it's better for you. And it
right.
turns out that the plastic is putting poison into the water. The plastic bottle is putting poison into the water when we already filtered and cleaned the water to be able to bottle it. And it's just like, well, shit, man. Like, what do you even do about it? You know? It sucks.
There's nothing you can do. Just like whatever.
No,
Just enjoy life.
no, no. That's it, man. And you try and you try. That's the thing, right? Like you just being aware and cognizant of this stuff. Like you just try to do better. You try to make
Mhm.
good choices, but it's like there's no perfect solution to any of it. You know.
No, no. Let's hop over to the next one while we're talking about the media and overreach and everything. So you're a big sports fan. I'm sure you've
I am
heard all the Caitlin Clark controversy. Um,
absolutely.
so this article is I want to cover the whole controversy and everything to do with her, but this article is saying like the media is basically in love with Caitlin Clark, and that's all they're talking about in these sports shows, including like Pat McAfee,
Yeah.
who's noted in this article, um,
Yep.
are like head over heels for her.
Sure.
And they weren't covering anything in the WNBA prior to her joining the
Right.
league.
Right.
My take on it, just from a media perspective, is she gets eyeballs, she gets clicks. That's what the
Yep.
media is there to do. Of course, they're talking about her, and the
Yep.
more they talk about her, the more people read about her and watch videos on her, and it just the cycle continues.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And man, I'll tell you, right? Like, so, I've been a basketball nut my whole life. But my daughter, Sienna, who's been playing ball for a couple years, is a gymnast first, but has been playing basketball for a couple years and is the type who like is a good natural athlete, but
Mhm.
hasn't had it in her yet to like want to go work on her game, right?
Right.
Um, which is sort of the opposite of her sister Beans, right? And man, I'll tell you, the Caitlin Clark effect is real because she is
Mhm.
passionate now about the WNBA, passionate about it.
Right. Yep.
And I'll say what it reminds me of, the Caitlin Clark effect. It reminds me of what they talk about with Magic and Bird at the end of the 70s and the beginning of the 80s, right? Where Magic and Bird played against each other in the national championship game. And there were awesome ratings for that college national championship game. And then the
Mhm.
next season, they were the top two picks in the draft for like the two legacy teams in the NBA. And then they were like right in the mix immediately in the playoffs, and Magic wins the title his first year. And then the Celtics are right there, and then they battled in the whole 80s. And everybody looks at that and they say, man, that saved the NBA. It set the table for Jordan and for the Dream Team, and then for the NBA to just become this massive global thing where the NBA went from being like sort of obscure pro sports to being primetime because of
Right.
just these two guys and their battles, right? In
Mhm.
college, and then it transferring to them becoming professionals. And Caitlin Clark had a little bit of that same thing to her, where she was this scoring phenom, kind of carrying a team that wasn't quite as good as the upper highest echelon of the UConns, the USCs, the LSUs, right? USC meaning South Carolina, but even University of Southern California, like they weren't quite on that echelon. And her just insane scoring, her ball handling, her shooting had this appeal. And then her like going to set records and then sort of carrying this team, she drew all these eyeballs just because I guess everybody hadn't seen a sort of prolific scorer like her. And it caught fire in a way where all of a sudden she started driving ratings to these college games. And now she's a pro. So now she's a pro. And she brought all of those fans that she created at Iowa to the WNBA with her. And it's like an unseen sensation, and it's like an immediate impact that she's had. And it's created this weird situation with the media. It's created this weird situation with her competition in the WNBA. And people don't know how to cover it, right? And it's like I heard. I know you should extrapolate on it. I'm not going to say a ton more because I probably could go on forever about it. But
no, keep going. This is good.
That is similar to it. In her sort of being like the chosen one was what they said about Wayne Gretzky when Wayne Gretzky came into the NHL. Was that everybody on his team and everybody in the league knew that's the dude, right? And that's the dude, but he's not a big guy, but he's so gifted, right? So like his team has to be built to like protect him, to let him do his thing. And like, not that the league would come down hard against anyone going after Gretzky, but it was basically understood like that's the dude. So you can't kill the golden goose. Like it doesn't serve the league well if you go kill the golden goose. You know what I mean? So I know that it's gotta be a weird conflict of emotions for the girls who are trying to compete against her. You know, I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
What do you think?
And I agree with everything you said there. And there's a lot of people I read on like Threads and some of the other platforms who are saying she's only big because she's white. And that doesn't make any sense to me because there's other white players who don't draw the attention she does. And I know she's not scoring. She's not the leading scorer in the league right now, but people see the potential there. And she's fun to watch. It's like watching LeBron when he first joined the league, right?
Yep. No, very much, man. And it's like, I think she happens to be white. And I don't think that hurts her by any means. But Michael Jordan wasn't white. And Michael Jordan captured the imagination of the whole world. So like, it's one of those things. I think she just so happens to be a white girl. And she just so happens to maybe be like a little bit girl next door-ish in her presentation, in her mannerisms. You know, she's definitely intense in like sort of like a Kobe kind of way, but she's not in your face in any way, like in how she speaks and how she carries herself. Only her game has some, you know, hot sauce on it, but the rest of it is not non-threatening. And I don't think that hurts. I don't think that hurts that it's very girl next door-ish, you know, the packaging that this specific player is in. But, you know, when you were saying about Pat McAfee did like a whole segment, a produced segment about her on the show. And the one part of it was talking about like, if it's just about her race, he talked about all the really incredible white girls who have come into the WNBA in the past decade, 2 decades, Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird and Breanna Stewart, Kelsey Plum, like those are all great female ball players, came into the league and didn't do what she did, didn't do what Caitlin Clark did, you know? So like, you know, I don't know. I think it's like a perfect storm almost in terms of the timing that this specific player arrived, you know, but it's interesting. It's interesting how the world perceives it all. And the people, there's a lot of people who are very much pro Caitlin Clark and a lot of people who are very anti Caitlin Clark. And it's wild how she draws that kind of strong reaction, you know?
Yeah. And I think, if I were a player in the WNBA, I wouldn't be thinking of it as like she's the enemy. It's more she's drawing all these eyeballs to us. So let's act accordingly. Let's show what we have because there could be more than one Caitlin Clark in this league.
Man. And if I just think of it personally, like if I'm another ball player in the WNBA and I see her in my head, I would have the crosshairs on her,
Hmm.
but not in a way like I'm going to kick her ass or push her around or talk shit to her. Like I'm going to go and I'm going to stop her, or I'm going to go and I'm going to beat her. I'm going to outdo what she
Right.
does, right? And
Yep.
if she's got all these eyeballs, this is my opportunity to put on display what I can do. Like, so as a
Hmm.
competitor, I get that urge. Like, and that's the urge that I would imagine a lot of these girls have. Like, okay, you think she's that great? I'm going to show you, right? Like
Exactly. Yeah.
that's awesome, and that's totally healthy. That's what competition's all about, you know. So like, there are a lot of if she's bringing these extra eyeballs, then there are opportunities there for these girls to display what they're capable of, you know?
Hmm. I think there's almost a parallel between her and Eminem as we talk
Sure,
hip hop all the
sure.
time, right? Like
Yeah,
there's a lot of rappers when he came out and still to this day who were like, You're stealing our culture, you're white, you're only popular because you're white."
yep,
I mean, I don't think he's popular because he's white. I think he's popular because he has skill. He paid his dues in the battle circuit. His subject matter was just wider than a lot of rappers at the time. Like,
sure.
we love Nas, we love Jay-Z, all these guys. But a lot of the country can't relate to any of that.
Right.
Eminem came and he made relatable hip hop and he was good
Yep,
at it. And it
yep.
brought, as a parallel to Caitlin Clark, it brought a lot of people, new fans into hip hop
Very much so.
who wouldn't have been
Very
listening to
much
it,
so.
right?
Very much so. Very much so. And took what was all already like sort of an established in some places um respected, American art form and made it more accessible, like you're saying.
Exactly.
And and there's the truth of the matter is I don't think as broad an audience, as diverse an audience has ever cared about women's basketball as they do right now.
Right.
And that's because of her. And I'm like, how could that be bad? You
No,
know,
it's not. It's awesome. It's elevated it to be one of the top sports for people.
man,
It's now a viable sport.
it's on in my house every night now. Sienna's got it
Mhm.
on every night. Not and here's the thing, it's not just the Indiana fever. Like she had Seattle and New York on last night, and she was like, "Oh, Daddy, Las Vegas Aces are on tomorrow night." And I'm like, and it's like Las Vegas Aces, just for example, their head coach, they've won 2 titles in a row. Their
Mhm.
head coach is Becky Hammon. Becky Hammon was Popovich's assistant on the Spurs. Like
Right.
if not Dawn Staley from South Carolina, Becky Hammon could very possibly be the first female head coach in the NBA.
Mhm.
Like she's got the pedigree now. She was like Popovich's main assistant. Now she's won 2 titles in the WNBA. Who could say if she comes and gets an offer, who could say she doesn't deserve it? Nobody. Nobody could make the argument
Mhm.
that she's not worthy of that opportunity. And that'll be a big deal for equal rights and civil rights and that sort of stuff when there's a head coach in one of the major professional American sports. That'll be a massive deal. And like she could be
Yeah.
that, you know?
Mhm.
And Caitlin Clark making more people watch these games and care more about these ball players and be more aware of these teams and these coaches and all that stuff is only helping that cause. It's not hurting
Yeah.
that cause, it's just helping that cause, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I went to my parents' house a couple weeks ago, and, we were there with my brothers and my dad, and my dad put on the WNBA. It's the first time in my entire life he's cared about the WNBA.
Yep.
It was
Yep.
wild. I would
No.
imagine there's a lot of households like that.
And that's it. And that's the thing about it too, right? Is like I remember being a kid and Dawn Staley being at Virginia and she was from Philly. And she was like one of my favorite guards. Not favorite female guards. She was one of my favorite guards. She was just like this crazy point guard, like awesome player. And um there have been great female players my whole lifetime, but
Mhm.
nobody really cared. Nobody was really paying attention except
Right.
people who were except girls who were ball players and people who were specifically, for whatever reason, interested in women's basketball. But now
Mhm.
the whole world is watching. Your dad cares, and it's
Yep.
like that's a huge deal. That's a huge deal. That's something that didn't exist before, and it's like, and these great players have been here all this whole time. These great
Right.
female players have been here this whole time. Cheryl Swoops and Lisa Leslie and those girls have been able to go forever, and they didn't get the props they deserve, except like little moments, right? Like the Olympics, they go win the
Mhm.
gold medal, and there'd be an Olympic game where the U.S. team with all these you know all Americans and all these WNBA stars would go and they'd go win the title or whatever, they go win the gold medal or whatever, and like they get a little moment, but that was it,
Mhm.
and not and Caitlin Clark is like made the world care and pay attention. And it's like that. I just don't see how that could be a bad thing. And the people who like wish her, don't wish her well, or see a problem with it. That I don't understand. That I don't understand.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, she's not the whole WNBA, and nobody's saying she is. She was the spark that blew this whole thing up.
Yep. Yep. And not. And here's the thing, man. Like race is such an important thing, and race plays has such an impact on so many things. But not every single thing needs to predominantly be about race. And I don't think
Mhm.
that's necessarily the case with this, you know? And
Right.
it's like, because here's the thing, right? It's the same thing you said about Eminem. Eminem just so happens to be white, but he's also
Exactly.
an incredibly skilled MC and is almost universally respected by his peers.
Mhm.
And those guys wouldn't respect Eminem if Eminem just wasn't a dope MC. It just so happens
Right.
that he's white. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I feel like that's the same deal with Caitlin Clark, And
Yeah.
I think it'll be interesting to see, like, I don't know if you've seen Juju Watkins on USC, but she's a guard. She was a guard last year, and she's like on a pace. She's on like Caitlin Clark's pace, but she was a freshman last year. And
Mhm.
she's going to be a huge star in women's basketball. And what'll be interesting to see is like how the landscape has changed between pre Caitlin Clark and post Caitlin Clark, right? And like, how
Yeah.
will she be featured? How will she be embraced? You know, will she be a part of like that zeitgeist and go along with Caitlin Clark? Will she have her own thing? Will it not be as will the world not get as fired up about it because Caitlin Clark's just that special and just that different? But like, there are other great players coming, and like, will they? I feel like they're all going to benefit from what Caitlin Clark's
Yeah.
accomplished.
100%. While
Absolutely.
we're on the subject of race,
Yep.
let's hop
Yep.
into Negro League stats put Josh Gibson on top. So they recently, I think it was, when was it, last month? Um,
Yep.
where they added the Negro League stats to Major League Baseball.
Yep.
And with that being done, Josh Gibson now beats out Babe Ruth and all of the other legends of baseball for his hitting. Um,
In multiple categories. Yep.
mhm. um, this was this needed to happen a long, long time ago. Um, but I think it's a good thing this did happen because now people are going to learn more about the Negro Leagues. Hopefully, right? These are should become household names.
Absolutely. And it's here's the thing. It's it comes from the right place. Major League Baseball wanting to do this comes from the right place.
Mhm.
But it's by its nature, it's imperfect,
Right.
right? Like it's not a perfect thing where you just slot them in and there it is. And it's like, oh, well, there you go. Like it's just not you know what? And you mentioned Caitlin Clark, 10-second sidebar. Caitlin Clark, right? They talk about how she not only set the record for men, I mean for women, she set the record for men in college basketball.
Mhm.
The only thing about it is that she broke Pistol Pete Maravich's record, technically, right? She scored more points than Pistol Pete Maravich. But Pistol Pete Maravich did so in 3 seasons because you weren't allowed to play as a freshman when Pistol Pete played,
Mhm.
and with no 3-pointers.
Okay.
So Caitlin scored what Pistol Pete did in 4 years. What Pistol Pete did in 3 years, she did in 4 years, and with the 3-point, right?
Mhm.
So like it's not the same as like adjusted for inflation, but
Right.
adjusted for like four adjusted for like 4 seasons and 3-pointers. Pistol Pete has like 6,500 points. right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
it's such a ridiculous feat. Like there's almost nothing like what Pistol Pete accomplished in sports. Like it's an untouchable record when it's seen for what it exactly is. And
Mhm.
and I say to Tara, like I couldn't be. I'm a dad of 4 girls. Like I couldn't be more of a like feminist. But the truth
Uh,
of the matter is like that it's not apples to apples. It's not a perfect thing because what
right.
Pistol Pete accomplished needs to stand on its own. And yes, she scored more points, but it's not. She didn't cleanly break the record in that same way.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
think to myself, like they gave Roger Maris an asterisk because he hit 61 over 60 in like 4 more games than Babe Ruth. And I'm like, if Roger Maris gets an asterisk, then like Caitlin Clark's got to have a huge asterisk. She had a whole extra
Yeah.
season and was able to shoot threes. You know, so it's a
Mhm.
different thing. So like the Negro League thing is completely imperfect too. Like because it just doesn't slot in perfectly. It's basically being done because of what a grave injustice it was that these guys didn't get to play with
Mhm.
Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and Ty Cobb and all those guys prior to 1947, prior to Jackie Robinson. So it's
Yeah.
like by the very nature of what it is, it can't be perfectly done. So you just have to sort of accept that it is what it is. And a lot of people
Mhm.
are very hesitant. I don't know if you've read on the internet or seen the comments about it. A lot of people don't feel good about it. A lot of people are
Yeah,
not happy.
I haven't gone down that rabbit hole yet. I don't know if I'm going to.
You shouldn't. You shouldn't. You
No.
shouldn't because they start to make arguments like, oh, well, if we're gonna count those stats, then why don't we? This is just one of the examples, and I say it's a dog whistle. But one of the
Yeah.
examples that they use is Ichiro played
Mhm.
multiple seasons in Japan before he came to the major leagues and had 3,000 however many hits and or was the Hall of Famer in America, but had multiple seasons that he played in Japan before he came over here. And they're like, oh,
Mhm.
well, we need to include Ichiro's stats from Japan with his hits, and then he has more hits than Ty Cobb and P Rose.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, okay, but Ichiro wasn't not allowed to play in America, right?
Right.
And two, wasn't he wasn't playing in another league in America because he wasn't allowed to play in the major leagues. So that's the
Mhm.
difference. He was playing
Yeah.
overseas by choice,
Mhm.
and by circumstance, not because he was barred because of societal ills. Like it's not apple. That's another not apples to apples scenario. But there, people were so inclined to do so, try to undermine what the Negro League players accomplished, and are
Mhm.
trying to make it seem like these stats aren't legitimate, and
Right.
that's the hill that they want to die on. That these stats aren't legitimate, and that
Yeah.
if we're going to count those, then we need to count everybody's stats from everywhere, whoever played baseball, basically, you know.
Mhm.
And it's
Yeah, and
like,
I don't know that it was an actual rule that they couldn't play, just no teams would take them. At least I think that's what I had read, and, like, there were a few
right,
teams who wanted to have African American players, but the teams they were opposing would say, "We're not playing you if you have a black player on the team."
right. No, it was like a gentleman's agreement,
Yeah.
essentially. I mean, and you say that word, gentleman's agreement, right? But like an unspoken, right, racist agreement. But it was like
Yeah.
an unspoken handshake among all the owners of these teams that they wouldn't bring on African American players. And it's like it wasn't until 1947, right? And Brooklyn Dodgers and Jackie Robinson and Branch Rickey. And Jackie Robinson was chosen not because Jackie Robinson was the best player. Jackie Robinson
Mhm.
was chosen because of like his character as a human being and his resume. And that they
Right.
thought like, oh, this could be the dude. This could be the guy who does this, who
Mhm.
is willing to take a bullet for everybody else to come after him just
Mhm.
because of like his obviously he was ultra talented but as an athlete, but because of sort of his character and these other attributes, his personality and whatnot, they're like, all right, maybe this is the guy. This guy's got the packaging and the wherewithal to be able to be the guy, to be that first guy who endures all that he's going to have to endure to open the door for everybody else,
Mhm.
um but yeah, it's just a testament to how unjust things were at that time and then how far we've come since then. And yeah, it's Major League Baseball's attempt to try to fix that
Mhm.
injustice. And it's like, yeah, it's not perfect, but how sacred are any of these numbers anyway? How sacred are
Right.
these statistics anyway? And it's like, and a lot of the stuff is crazy anyway. Like Satchel Paige. As soon as I saw that, the Josh Gibson thing, I immediately thought Satchel Paige was like the greatest pitcher of the Negro Leagues. And I thought to
Mhm.
myself, oh man, if Josh Gibson is now got the highest batting average and these other factors, I thought, oh man, like Satchel Paige is going to be the greatest pitcher ever statistically by like a mile. Like it won't even be
Mhm.
close. And then I saw his wins went up like 25 wins. And I'm like, what? Like they say that the guy might have had 2,000 wins, Mike, right?
Uh-huh.
And like the major league pitcher with the most wins, I think is Cy Young with like 500, right?
Yeah.
And like 300 gets you in the Hall of Fame. And I think they estimate Satchel Paige might have 2,000 wins and like pitched every other day for 20 years,
Uh-huh.
right? And it's like and had like 100 starts a season or something like that, right? And it's like, well, and his stats didn't even change that much. And he didn't get to pitch in the major leagues until he was like in his 40s. Like
Mhm.
I think he's got like 120 wins in the major leagues, and he didn't break into the major leagues till he was like 42 years old or something like that.
That's
And it's
crazy.
like, I know, and his stats aren't even like properly represented, and didn't even change that much with this whole change. And I'm like, well, this whole thing's imperfect, but at least it's getting some of these guys the credibility that they deserve on like that statistical stage. But it doesn't sit well with a lot of people, you know.
Yeah. I think one, it brings the Negro Leagues back into the conversation, which
Yep,
is a great thing because I think a lot of
of
people
course,
forget that it even happened or
of course,
try to forget that it happened.
of course.
And two, like you said, like these statistics and rankings and stuff, they're never apples to apples. Like you can't compare Babe Ruth to Barry Bonds to, you know, Aaron Judge.
Yep,
They all played it completely different times against different pitchers.
of course.
So they're not, I mean, I'm not gonna say they're meaningless, but it doesn't show you a true ranking. I just think it shows you the best players of their time, and these guys are in
Oh,
the conversation.
oh, absolutely, of course. It absolutely does. It absolutely does. And you're right. As the eras change, those statistics mean a little less.
Mhm.
It's like the GOAT conversation in basketball. It's the same thing.
Right.
It's like, because as a kid, and to this day, I think Jordan's the GOAT, but I think LeBron is the best of his era. And I think that's
Mhm.
pretty much undeniable. So, like, if somebody who's 15 years younger than me says, no, LeBron's the best, I'd be like, yeah, I get it. Like,
Yeah.
right? Just like I would talk about, Jordan and my dad would be like, yeah, but you never saw Oscar Robertson play, you never saw Jerry West play, you never saw those guys play.
Mhm.
And Connie Hawkins, Dr. J, I saw all those guys play. Elgin Baylor, you're gonna tell me Jordan's better than those guys? I don't know. I'm like, all right.
Mhm.
It's like, all right, well, I didn't see them in their time, and I didn't get to, it's one thing you can read about these guys, but you didn't witness them in their time and see them play against the competition of that time. So it's impossible to say. It's a matter of the era that they're in. But
Yeah.
like
I think
it's like anything, and I think the point that you were making is a good one too, right? The thought that like maybe people just don't want to remember that the Negro Leagues existed, and the
mhm.
really and this puts it back in people's faces. And I used to say, like, as you see people trying to censor and whitewash history in school,
Yep.
and I remember saying this in social media somewhere, and somebody's like, dude, that's fucking crazy. What, are you nuts? And I said, will there be a time in American history, will there be a time in our schools or places in the country at the very least in schools where it'll be illegal to teach about Jackie Robinson? My friend was like,
Mhm.
well, why? What, are you crazy? Why would you say that? And I would say, well, because Jackie Robinson is so significant because of what he represented in terms of where society was at that specific moment,
Mhm.
right? So people might now want to remember that the Negro Leagues existed because they don't want to acknowledge the fact that the Negro Leagues had a reason to exist
Right.
because those ball players weren't allowed to play or couldn't play or didn't have access to play in the major leagues because of how
Mhm.
fucked up we were as a society at that point, right? And it's like Jackie Robinson isn't a massive historical figure if it weren't for the fact that he had to overcome this injustice, this social injustice. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And like, you know, to the point where like Martin Luther King would give credit to, you know, people would say, oh, Martin Luther King's like the, you know, the father of the civil rights movement. And Martin Luther King would say Jackie Robinson was. Because Jackie
Mhm.
Robinson was like 15 years before him and had to endure so much on that world stage, you know,
Yeah.
just to create some level of equality and a level playing field, you know. So like the this thing with Josh Gibson and these statistics reminds people of a dark moment in our history. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons there's and it could be even an unconscious reason for some of the resistance to changing the
Mhm.
stats because people don't want
Yeah.
to admit that things weren't equal and things, and there was this, you know, prominent injustice in our world, you know.
Mhm. And we're at a weird point where people don't want to admit anymore that America has done anything wrong, that we're this
Right,
perfect country, right?
right.
And it's crazy to see. Like you said, you probably can't talk about Jackie Robinson in Florida with the laws where they're getting rid of racial studies and stuff like that. And I always thought we were supposed to learn from that, so we didn't do it again. Like that,
That's
we've
it.
been taught that since we were kids.
That's it, right? And it's and just like you and I aren't perfect, right? Like America's not perfect, right? It's the idea of,
Mhm,
right, it's a more perfect union, right? Like
mhm.
slowly often, agonizingly slowly often, right? Just inching in the direction of doing the right thing, right? Like
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
against resistance and all that stuff forever. That's what the country's all about. That's the idea that like, no, we're not perfect. All right, we have these original sins. All right, we have these dark moments in our history. The idea is that we're always trying to fix it and make good on it and not
Mhm.
do it again, right?
Yep.
And like, you know, the thought that there's resistance to learning these lessons about these moments that, you know, we aren't necessarily proud of. Like, all right, well, the pride is to be found in overcoming it, and now we're gonna not raise our kids to see the world that same way, you know, and that's lost on some people. They'd rather just act like it never happened, and it's like it does a lot of people a disservice to act like it never happened, you know,
Yeah.
and including these stats just puts it in people's face, like, all right, well, these guys, it could just say this, right? If you take all the emotion out of it, theoretically, these guys were that great, and we have to do this weird thing to the staff because they weren't allowed to play. It's like,
Mhm.
it's fucked up when you put it that way, you know?
Yeah. And they were
You
that
know?
good that coaches were trying to sneak them into the league and pass them off as
Sure.
Native Americans
Yep. Yep.
because
Yep. That
it's
happened. That happened. That
it's
happened
weird
many
that
times over the years, for sure. For
yeah,
sure.
it was just black people that weren't allowed to play, which I gotta read more into this, but I don't know why it was just one group. It's bizarre. And they were great players
Yeah.
too. I don't know why they wouldn't want to play against them.
It makes no sense. It makes no sense, you know? And it took
Um,
that long. And it took that long, man. And it's like, you know, you think about, you know, there's like, if you ever see the Ken Burns baseball documentary, but like even like Babe Ruth was kind of like the Caitlin Clark effect for baseball, right?
mhm,
Like where it went from being a game, you know, where Magic and Bird, where it went from being, you know, a game that people liked to a game that people couldn't get enough of, and that the whole world,
right.
the whole country cared so much about and was paying so much
Mhm,
attention about was, you know, Babe Ruth being this sensation. But you know, that's like the 20s and 30s, you know, and Jackie Robinson is until 1947, and then like, you know, all the great black ball players like Henry Aaron, Willie Mays, Roberto Clemente, that's the early 50s, and those
mhm,
guys, you know, there's a whole generation prior to them that never got an opportunity to play in the Caitlin Clark era, right? They never got a
yeah,
chance to play in the Babe Ruth era when everybody was watching. Those
mhm,
great players could have been playing against those guys, and they talk about that. They talk about how Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, um, Babe Ruth, who was like an orphan from the streets of Baltimore, like who grew up
yep,
underprivileged, really difficult circumstances, and then Lou Gehrig, who was like the ultimate gentleman, went to Columbia, like a very like astute, worldly, brilliant guy, all American athlete, multiple sports. Those guys barnstormed and played against the Negro League throughout the 30s and stuff, and caught shit
mhm,
from the league about it. But we're such a big deal. We're such heavy hitters that they couldn't do any. They couldn't do anything to them. But like
right.
those guys toured and played against the Negro Leagues, like and so there are exhibitions where Babe Ruth was, you know, I don't know who the great Negro League players were that those guys actually were on the same field with and shared the field with. That's an interesting thing to research, but Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig played against those guys in exhibition games and like embraced them. You know, so
Mhm.
it's not that everybody from that era was evil. You know, they weren't
No, no.
necessarily. It was that the system was fucked. You know,
Hmm.
and the people in
Yeah, I
power,
mean,
people in power.
yeah, my son's a huge baseball fan, so he brings home baseball books from school,
Yeah,
and a lot of them are like the history of baseball.
yeah,
And one of them was talking about the Negro Leagues and Hank Aaron, and he couldn't wrap his head around why the country was doing this to black people.
of
Like,
course,
because he's young and
of
he
course,
just doesn't understand why we would ever do that. And then, I tried to explain to him, what had happened during that time. And he's like, so back then the white people were the bad people. And I'm like, no, that's not what I
yeah,
said. I was like,
no,
the system was messed up. And there were some really great white people like Babe Ruth who went and played against these guys and
yep,
championed for them.
yep.
Um, and when you think about it, that wasn't that long ago. I mean, my dad
It's
was
not.
alive. My dad was born before Jackie Robinson played.
Yep, yep. So was my dad.
So that was one person
Yep,
ago.
yep, yep.
So like,
No, it's
we've
crazy.
come a long way as a country, which is awesome. But it was up until not that long ago that we were still fucking up.
Of course, and you're right. Like in terms of our lifetime and a human lifespan, seems like a long time ago. But in terms of human history, it's like not even the blink of an eye. You know
No.
that period of time between you know Josh Gibson and Satchel Paige not being able to play in the major leagues and today, like it's a it's nothing in terms of human
Hmm.
history.
Yeah.
It seems so long ago, but it's another one of those things too where it's like when it comes to equal rights and our perception of those things, like you know, I look back at the '60s and think to myself, man, like what were we, barbarians, like what the like how could we not have seen the this how could society how could our society not have seen like this grave injustice, right? And I feel
Hmm.
like with each generation that comes, that feeling gets worse and worse where like our kids, your son brings that book home and he's like, dad, make this make sense. It makes no sense to me,
Hmm.
and it's like, and good, I'm glad that he feels that way because it means we're making progress, but it is crazy. I read a thing about when Henry Aaron was, I don't think he was in the major leagues yet, but he was young, and he was with the Negro League team prior to going to the Braves, and he was like 18, like he's a kid,
Hmm.
and his team stopped at a restaurant somewhere in the South, and after they ate, they heard the staff breaking the plates and throwing them in the trash because black people had eaten off the plates.
That's
And it's
insane.
like, it's fucking insane, man. And then, Henry Aaron just passed away. Like, like a lot of his peers are still alive. And it's like,
Hmm.
and right. And he's like athletic royalty in our country. And
Hmm.
that's something that he endured, you know,
Yep.
as a young man. It's just like, you know, and that was like you said, that was like in our father's lifetime.
Right.
Crazy,
Yeah.
crazy.
Crazy.
So like for our kids and stuff, they look at that stuff and they think like just seems like a different planet, you
Yeah.
know?
Hmm.
Crazy,
Yeah.
crazy.
On that note, you want to wrap?
Yeah, man.
I got to
It
run.
was a good one, man.
Yeah, man.
Wide ranging.
I like it. Keep doing it
I
that
dig
way
it, man.
from
I
now
dig
on.
it. It's good stuff. Yeah, no, it's good stuff. It's a good mixture.
Hmm. All right. So we'll do it again next week.
I'm looking forward to it, bro. Absolutely.
All right.
We gotta do a reaction video. I
We're
still
gonna
want
do a
us to do
reaction.
one.
The next one's a reaction video.
All right, I'm in. I'm in.
All right. Cool. Cool. All right.